Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today. I do want to share some updates on the progress we've made in processing unemployment insurance claims, the challenges that persist, and the actions that we're taking to address those challenges. The Federal CARES Act was intended to provide urgent and much needed relief for Oregonians, which many of you have not felt. Each week I provide updates on progress, but I know that progress doesn't seem fast enough or doesn't help your situation. We know Oregonians are struggling, frustrated, and desperate for their benefits. I'm frustrated, and our employees are frustrated. No one could have predicted just how painful these circumstances could be. What keeps me going is that every day I see the most dedicated employees showing up, working hard, and being problem solvers. It's inspiring, and we are so proud of our employees who live our organization's values, two of which seem particularly relevant at this time: being conscientious stewards of public resources and promoting a positive, safe, and learning environment. We're hearing suggestions from our employees every day and making adjustments to more quickly get people their benefits. I want to share a couple of updates on the work and then address some of the challenges and actions being taken to address them. We've paid out almost $2.5 billion in unemployment benefits since the start of the pandemic. This is money going directly to Oregonians and back into our communities. We continue to hire more staff to get more money to more people. Last week, I shared that we increased the number of employees working on unemployment claims from 100 in early March to 750. In the past week, we hired 114 more employees. Some, about 35, are internal promotions to adjudicators, but most of these are new employees. Over 90 of those people started this week and are in various stages of training. We now have over 85 people processing work-share claims and applications. In March, we had 2 to 4 at any given time. Since the pandemic, about 1,379 employers have signed up for work-share, with more than 15,000 people getting work-share benefits just for last week. The Extended Benefits Program is available now to eligible unemployed Oregonians. This is as of June 28, 2020, due to the unprecedented impact of the COVID-19 public health emergency and the rising unemployment rate. Another program, the High Extended Benefit Program, will be in place effective July 5th, 2020. These benefit extension programs combined provide up to 20 weeks more of benefits to people who use up their regular unemployment insurance benefits. And to be clear, besides other new programs, there are now 3 benefit extension programs in place. These 2 that I just mentioned, extended benefits and high extended benefits, and the new Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, or PEUC program, created in the CARES Act. Each program has its own federal requirements and complexities. We have about 2,000 regular unemployment insurance claims to be processed. This is just a fraction of the number we're receiving each week. This crucial initial processing is needed on all claims before benefits can be paid. This step had been a roadblock for us to get benefits to people, and that particular roadblock has now been largely removed. There remain other challenges, though. Not everyone whose claim has been processed is getting benefits. You can be assured we know that this is a problem, and we're dedicated to resolving these claims as quickly as possible. For those whose claims have been processed but not paid, we're hosting a webinar on Thursday, July 2nd at 12:30 to talk about some of the common reasons for delays. We're still facing hurdles with processing pandemic unemployment assistance applications, but we're learning more each day. We're still holding ourselves accountable to our goals shared last week. In the first 7 weeks the PUA program existed in Oregon, we processed about 17,000 claims. For week 1 of Focus PUA, we estimated we could get through 5,000 applications, and then an additional 2,500 each week thereafter as our processes smooth out. In week 1, which was last Sunday through Saturday, we were able to process 4,368 PUA applications, about 600 shy of our goal, but much more than we had been processing the week before that. Our goal for this week is to process 7,500 applications, and we're working hard to meet these targets. We changed several processes late last week and saw a big increase in the latter part of the week in how quickly we could process claims. We're monitoring daily to make more improvements. We're close to launching the new Google application for PUA, which will allow us to more quickly input applications into our system for processing. We expect this to be ready the first half of July. Importantly, this will largely automate the processing of weekly PUA claims people are filing. By the end of next week, we're also adding 150 to 200 more phone lines, which will add capacity for both regular unemployment and PUA phone lines. While we have gotten through 99% of the regular unemployment claims and processed those claims, there's still a large number that require an adjudicator to complete the claim. An adjudicator reviews cases that have a variety of issues, such as why someone is unemployed, looking at conflicting information received from the worker and employer, and many other issues that can arise. If people have not received their regular unemployment benefits, their case is likely a complex one that may require an adjudicator to complete it. We are several weeks behind in the adjudication process, and we're addressing this by hiring more adjudicators and quickly. Before the pandemic, we had about 80 adjudicators. As of this week, we have more than 125, and we're planning to double that number. It's worth reminding people that if you hear from us and we're asking you for information right away, such as within 2 days or 5 days, we do want that information as quickly as possible. But we know how hard it is for you to get us that information right now. This isn't your fault, and we understand that. So if we take action on your claim and we get your information later than that timeline we've set out, we will review that information and we'll make corrections if needed. We're very grateful to every employee who's working to make sure Oregonians get the benefits they deserve. As stewards of public funding, we strive for the highest standards of service and compassion for the Oregonians we seek to serve. Since the start of this crisis, there have been several accounts of employees sharing their concerns publicly, which they are welcome to do. At the same time, we encourage an open dialogue with employees, and we want to hear their concerns directly. We have a lot of employees with a lot of different views and experiences. Our leadership team strives to foster a workplace where employees can feel comfortable speaking up and speaking with management without hesitation when something's not right. We're having good conversations with SEIU, the union representing our employees, about how we can all work together to serve Oregonians. A key part of this is supporting our employees as they work tirelessly to get people their benefits. Our employees have brought about many of the changes over the past few weeks that have improved our work and our workplace and the lives of so many Oregonians, and we encourage that. And we expect all communications from all of our employees with the public to be accurate and truthful. If any employee has felt pressure to work against that principle, we want to hear about it. I want to hear about it so that we can correct that situation. We recognize that we can all make mistakes, and whenever an employee raises concerns around mismanagement or lack of honesty, we take these concerns seriously and we vigorously investigate concerns to correct actions that don't meet our standards. We will do this work better, and we are immensely grateful to every employee for your contributions to this important work and for the ways you're helping us do our work better. We appreciate the opportunity to share these updates and will continue to provide them as we make progress over the coming weeks and months. We continue to be grateful to serve Oregonians and hope to continue sharing more progress over the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Now I would like to open the line to reporters. Lindsay Nadrich with COIN, please go ahead.
Yeah, hey, so I spoke to someone who is in that group of people. It sounds like their claim needs to be adjudicated. They were asking if we could get real numbers and a real time frame of how many people are waiting to be adjudicated and how long that could take.
That's a great question, Lindsay. In terms of the numbers of claims that will need adjudication, we're still working to find a good way to track that, especially with the PUA program being new. It makes it really hard for us to get solid numbers on how many claims were in that situation. We are working on it, and we hope to be able to provide that kind of information publicly. In terms of timelines, I mentioned that we are several weeks behind. We're working to get through those adjudication claims as quickly as possible. Right now, it is taking up to 10 to 12 weeks for some of those to get fully resolved. We're dedicated to doing everything that we can to speed that up. Some of the things we're doing include looking through things that are normally flagged for a full adjudication process and seeing if, because of the unusual circumstances of the pandemic, we can resolve those issues much quicker. That's been successful in letting us go through many more issues than we've ever been able to. But with the huge number of people filing claims, there are still a lot of issues that need to be adjudicated. And that's why we're adding to the staffing so aggressively so that we can work through those.
And then a follow-up to that, the individual I spoke with said he called, and because he's in that group of people who need to be adjudicated, the person on the phone couldn't really help them. So is it helpful for those folks to call, or can they not be helped if they're in that process? Do they just have to wait?
So once their case is in adjudication, we do have it assigned to an individual adjudicator because they're frequently having to get information from multiple people. It's a little different than when people are calling in to get an issue with their claim resolved, where we have large groups of people that have the training, and from hearing the information from the person calling and looking in our systems, they likely can help. With the adjudication process, it's really the person who's spoken to the other parties, has done the more in-depth review of all of the detailed facts. So in general, those people do need to talk to the adjudicator. And that's why when the adjudicators are calling out, they're generally leaving their direct phone number so that if people need to call back, they're not going into that general queue. They are calling back to talk to the specific person who's working on their particular case.
Okay, so just, sorry, lastly, for those people, so just wait for the adjudicator to call you, basically?
Correct. That's we're working through those as quickly as we can, and the adjudicators will reach out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Jim Ferretti, please go ahead. Jim Ferretti? Please go ahead. Okay. Next, we'll go to Mike Rogaway with the Oregonian.
Hi, David. Thanks for taking our calls again and our questions. You had a number, I think, you said in the first several weeks of PUA that there were 17,000 processed claims. I think that's the first 7 weeks. In hindsight, it took more than a month, I think, to get the phone lines online. In hindsight, should the department have held off on starting the PUA program until it was in better shape to handle claims?
It's a good question, Mike. I don't think so. We'll have more time to look retrospectively in more detail, I think, once we've gotten everyone their benefits. We were faced with a dilemma with all the new programs of trying to figure out how to get those rolled out as quickly as possible. So we were able to start paying some benefits within about 4 weeks of when the CARES Act passed for PUA. That was a challenge, and we knew that it was going to be rocky to begin with. We were working with Google to start helping us create a better process early on, but we're still not live with that improved process. So we certainly, there are tens of thousands of people that are waiting on us that are desperate to get their benefits, and we're very sorry for that, working to do everything we can. I certainly would feel worse if we hadn't yet started paying out any of those PUA benefits. So we think that we've been doing the best we can to start and to just make iterative improvements as soon as we're able. We know that it's been incredibly frustrating for people waiting and for our own employees who also really want to be helping everyone, and we just don't have the capacity to do that on day one of a brand new program.
Got it. And my follow-up question then, the phones obviously remain a huge hurdle. It does seem like the DMV has had success with its callback process. You and I have talked about this before, and initially the concern was that the volume of calls was such that a callback system simply wasn't practical. I wonder if you've revisited that at all now. It still seems sort of like a free-for-all, and it seems like a more structured system would at least give everyone an opportunity to connect.
It's a really good question, Mike, and we are having ongoing discussions and shifting who we have doing what work, including answering the phones. Even with a callback system, the core problem is still that there's just too many people waiting to get their benefits, and that's what we're focused on. So we need to leave avenues of communication open for the public to get through to us, not just for the people whose claims we know we need to work on, but if there's something unexpected, if there's a particular challenge that we're not aware of, we have to be able to hear about that. And the problem that we have right now is whether it's a callback system or the open lines or anything else, there are just so many people that all those avenues get flooded. We are really looking at other ways that we can communicate to try to improve that. But we've had the people that can make changes to our phone system have been also focused on getting more capacity. And we think that that ultimately is more helpful to keep adding to the capacity than doing the callback system. There isn't a great answer at this point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Jeff Robertson with Fox 12. Please go ahead, Jeff. Jeff with Fox 12. Okay, Peter Wong with
Hi.
Cambodia.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Washington State is going to ask for a federal loan because of the demand on their trust fund. What is the state of Oregon's trust fund? And I know Oregon did not need a federal loan after the Great Recession. Is there any possibility that you're going to need that this time?
So we're still watching that very closely. It's difficult to make projections when we're facing such an unusual circumstance. There's no history of a recession that came on so suddenly and so severely for us to model. But the projections that we have so far still have Oregon's trust fund staying solvent. We are paying out a lot of benefits. I mentioned that we've paid out almost $2.5 billion. We went into this with around $5 billion in the trust fund, and a lot of the benefits that are being paid out are federal benefits that don't deplete that number. So we're watching it very closely. Certainly a lot of states, not just Washington State, are already having to borrow, and many more are preparing to do that. At this point, we're still hopeful that Oregon will not need to do that, and we're relatively optimistic that that will be the case.
Okay, speaking of Congress, it's hazardous to guess what they might do, and your guess is as good as mine, but they are discussing some potential changes, extensions, or whatever. But regardless of what they are, if there are changes, how do you feel about the agency's capacity to be able to handle changes?
That's a very good question. We've been in close contact with the U.S. Department of Labor and others at the federal level to give our input about how easy or difficult different options might be for us to implement. We really want to get the most benefits to as many Oregonians as possible, and we want to give as much information up front about things that may be a more refined and better policy solution, but are much, much more difficult to implement. We want people to know that up front so that we can try to get the right balance. And we've been sharing that information. Other states have as well. Some of the considerations that have been talked about are the extra $600 that is scheduled to end the week ending July 25th, to making some sort of extension of that. We've shared, for instance, that not allowing that to lapse before there's a renewal or extension of it would make things easier for people relying on the money and for us to administer, and keeping it as a flat dollar amount is much easier for us to administer than some of the more complex proposals that were being talked about. So we're certainly watching that closely. We're concerned about how easily we'll be able to do it, but until we see what is moving, it's really hard to tell.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mira Powell with OPB. Please go ahead, Mira.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm just looking to get an updated overview of PUA numbers. I know last week it was approximately 70,000 claims, and obviously you've made some progress with the focus program. But what is the total number of PUA claims looking like right now? And are you continuing to get more PUA applications as you continue to dwindle them down?
We are continuing to get additional PUA applications. Certainly the pace of that is nowhere near what it was when it first started. I can share with you some numbers, and I'll reiterate and apologize that it's really hard for us to have accurate numbers on some parts of the PUA program because it is so manual. So we can tell you the number of people that we have paid PUA benefits to. That's just a little over 21,000 people. We know that we have reviewed and at least partially entered into our system over 29,600 applications. Some of the numbers that we shared before were that we had about 70,000 that needed to be reviewed and processed when we started Focus PUA. We also shared at that time the number of initial PUA applications that we had received, and we said that that was estimated in the upper 90,000s. As we're going through those claims, we're finding a lot of duplicate applications. So people that may have filed more than one PUA application. So we currently believe that the number of PUA applications that actually was filed is closer to 92 or 93,000. So we are moving through that. What the backlog looked like as we go into the numbers, some of what was in that backlog is actually duplication, but until we start working them, we can't really tell.
Thank you.
Next, Tom Cusack. Please go ahead, Tom.
Thanks a lot. I have a question about the dollars. David said the total is about 2.5 billion. And I think last week it was like 1.9 billion. So that's 600 million in a week compared to the prior week, which is in the order of about $240 million. Does that sound right to you?
That's a great question, and we had discussions about that earlier. We've been very cautious with not wanting to overstate what we've done, and particularly as we've rolled out these new programs. I was just talking about how difficult it is to have as solid and consistent data as we would like on PUA and on some of the other federal programs. So we've been refining the way that we're able to get that data, and as we've been able to refine that, we're getting a better number, and the just under $2.5 billion that we're reporting today, we are confident of that's how much we paid out since the pandemic started. We were reporting about 1.96 billion, I believe, last week. And as we've been able to refine the data, it looks like that was understating a little bit how much money we've actually been able to pay out to people. And again, that's us wanting to be real cautious and not overstate the work that we've done.
Thanks. So one follow-up question related to the initial claims week that hasn't been paid yet. I kind of did some math in my head, and if there's, roughly 250,000 people eligible for that, that's somewhere in the order of $225 million. Is there any specific progress been made in deciding how and when that initial week payment will be made?
So a few parts to this answer. One, the quick math is challenging. We've been doing the same quick math, and although we have 250,000 people, more than that, who have already received benefits, the extra $600 from the federal pandemic unemployment compensation program only applies to certain time periods. So only people who served their waiting week starting the week of March 29th through April 4th, that's the first week that you would be able to get the extra $600 along with the actual benefits. So the math isn't quite as easy, and we think that it is still a lot of money for a lot of people, but not as large as the quick estimate that you provided. In terms of progress on doing that work, we've continued to explore how we can do that the best way possible. We've had some folks from other agencies come in and look at what our plans are, help us analyze that. It's still, no matter how we approach it, a very significant body of work, so I cannot provide a definite time period as to when it will be done. We are continuing to work with the U.S. Department of Labor for as much flexibility as possible to make sure that nobody loses out on benefits. We're committed to getting everyone all of the benefits that they're eligible for. our team is still doing the other work needed to complete the PUA program and a lot of the other pieces though. And until they're in really working in the code on being able to get rid of the waiting week, we won't have a real solid estimate as to when we'll be able to do that.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Keaton Thomas with KATU. Please go ahead, Keaton.
David, thanks again for taking these calls. Much appreciated. First, kind of, I guess, a question for immediately today. I've heard from at least 3 different people this morning who say that they would normally and have been for several weeks getting a payment into their ReliaCard accounts, but today they never showed up. Are you aware of this? And do you have any explanation as to why those payments would have never showed up this morning?
So Keaton, I had not heard that until you mentioned it. So we certainly will dive in. We have some folks that are liaisons with the ReliaCard. So frequently when we've seen issues, it's been with ReliaCard, and we can work with US Bank to resolve those. So I don't have a definite answer, but it's certainly something that we'll be looking into quickly to fix.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just heard about those right before this call, so I figured I'd ask. Another question is just, it's with modernization. I haven't asked you this in a while, but I wanted to, in the past you had said that you were, in the process of doing vendor selection to be able to do the modernization. Where are we at with that? Have you selected a vendor, and can you share any information on who that vendor would be or when those selections would be made?
So we have not yet chosen a vendor, and because of all the requirements around the state procurement processes, can't really share that until we're ready to announce. When we do that, procedurally, we issue a notice of intent to award, and that's us saying who we intend to contract with as we enter into negotiations. So I don't have a definite time period. Clearly, the focus that we've had to take on the pandemic has shifted how quickly we're able to move on some other things. This is still a priority, and certainly the current situation has highlighted how important it is for us to modernize. But we want to make sure that we're picking the right vendor because that is such a crucial decision. So hope to have updates to share soon, but I don't have a definite date for you right now.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, if you are not asking a question, to please mute your phones. There is some background noise. Next, Mike Turner. Please go ahead, Mike. Mike Turner, please go ahead. Okay. Claire Withicombe with Statesman Journal. Please go ahead, Claire.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for making the time. I wanted to ask specifically about the waiting week issue, and I just want to make sure I understand the specific technical issue that prevents you, or the department rather, from paying folks for that waiting week right away.
Sure, Claire, and it is, it's complicated. So we've talked about how our unemployment insurance system is really, the backbone of it is the COBOL-based legacy systems that we have that have been built over the decades. And they do a really good job of processing payments. And as we built those systems, they were built around the assumption of a waiting week. So all of the computations that go into our systems have that assumption built in. Over the years and decades, as new technologies come out, new programs, new ways of interacting with the public, like using the internet, we've added new systems and layered them onto that backbone. And again, that waiting week is a core part of the assumptions. So some of the very real concerns that we have are that if we don't go through and find all the places that that waiting week is kind of threaded through the systems, if we start just paying the benefits, it is very likely that there are automatic checks and balances that have been built in to stop people from being overpaid that would automatically stop any future benefits from going out. So we might be able to make a retroactive payment for the waiting week, and then it would stop making any future payments to that person. It might even automatically trigger it and show that there was an overpayment. It can also cause problems with many other aspects of the claim, and that's what we want to avoid. And it's a lot of difficult to work to trace that waiting week through all the different parts of the system that it touches. It's also built into all of our federal reporting, and there are many federal reports that we submit, and that's not just kind of a bureaucratic technical requirement that we report on what we're doing. That's also what's used by the federal government to give us money, both into our trust fund and for administering the program. So we have to stay consistent with their requirements and data validation requirements, and that will be very difficult as we're kind of undoing that waiting week in the coding.
Okay, if I could ask a follow-up, what prevents the agency from some kind of simple workaround? For example, on the customer side, what if you just had people applying for benefits apply for a week earlier so that they would get reimbursed for what would technically be the waiting week that has now been waived? Does that question make sense?
It does make sense, and it's one of the solutions, one of the many solutions that we've talked through. And again, there's a lot of implications. These new federal programs have been starting and stopping at certain times. And by essentially backdating the claim a week, it would potentially let us pay that waiting week out, essentially, and might avoid some of the other complications. But the system is also built around those time frames. So for instance, we had a lot of people that filed right as we changed from the first quarter to the second quarter this year. And which quarter you file your claim in makes a difference. So some people might have had a valid claim in one quarter, but with a different benefit amount. And if we backdate the claim, it would look at it as being filed in a different quarter. They might not have an eligible claim in that quarter, and then they wouldn't actually be able to get any benefits. So that is one of the many workarounds that we've been exploring, but so far none of the workarounds are really possible without still having to trace the threads of that waiting week and other issues through the system.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Claire. I wanted to open up to anyone who we may have missed. If anyone else would like to ask any questions.
I have another question if there's no one else that didn't get to ask one.
Sure, go ahead, Lindsay.
Last week I asked about gross earnings and how some states are doing it differently. You said you were pursuing that with the Department of Labor. Is there any update on that yet?
I don't have an answer. I have an update that I know the Department of Labor is still looking at it and working with their attorneys to give guidance. So we're continuing to stay in touch and to see what we can do to get as many benefits to as many people as we can. We know that being able to switch to the net amount would help many of the self-employed people. So if we can do that, we will, and we're really just waiting on the federal answer for those federal payments as to whether we're allowed to do that.
Awesome. Just like in general for people, how long on average does it take to go from processing to getting a payment?
So I don't have the exact numbers, and I don't want to give any inaccurate information. For most people, from processing to payment is very quick. And that's one of the things, and I want to make sure I'm not being unintentionally misleading about this, but we've shared in the past that we actually have a higher percentage of claims that are getting paid out within 3 weeks than we do during normal times. That's probably shifting now as we're working through some of the really complex ones that have taken longer. And certainly the PUA claims have taken us much longer because the program didn't exist. On regular unemployment insurance, though, most people get paid out within a week or two after the processing is done. The adjudication is really the biggest challenge that we're seeing right now, where that's holding things up. There are some other types of things that can make that take a little bit longer. And then on the PUA program, once we process it, it still is relatively quick for most people, but it's that backlog of claims that we're working to get processed that is causing the delay.
Okay, and I have one more. Sorry, I had somebody email me asking about, like, I guess they were getting benefits for quite a few weeks, and then suddenly they stopped saying they reported themselves back to work, which they didn't. So they were asked to fill out a form. They said they mailed it in, and they're wondering who's checking the mail because they feel like their form is just getting lost when they send it back in.
And there's a couple of different things that could be going on there. We have lots and lots of people checking the mail because I think we are receiving more mail than we ever have in the past. So we are reviewing those. We're going through, that is another one of the areas where we know that some people are having that challenge. A lot of people originally, they told us, or their employer told us, that they expected the person to return to work at a certain time. And normally our system flags those claims so that we can follow up and make sure that people aren't both getting unemployment benefits and working full time, which they're not allowed to do. In this pandemic, we know that a lot of people thought they would be going back to work at a certain time, and that hasn't happened. So some of the cases are going through kind of the process that you described, where the system is automatically flagging those, pausing payments, and asking the person to provide us additional information. We actually have teams of people that are going through all of those claims as quickly as we can to stop many of them from even starting that process. Whether we can see enough information up front to know that they don't need to give us additional information, or sometimes making calls out to people just to follow up and get the information rather than going through what's programmed into our system, which is that mail a form out and wait to get the information back.
Thanks, Lindsay. Bill
Thank you.
Polar, looks like you raised your hand.
Yeah, hi. So we've seen a lot of data from the department about the total number of claims that have been made, the total number of claims that have been processed. Do we know how many people have been actually paid benefits?
So we believe it's about 273,000 people that have been paid. We're still working on refining the data, especially comparing the PUA information to the regular unemployment. It gets more complex than it seems like it should have to be to figure out how many people that actually represents. I've talked before about how a lot of people applied for both programs. So if you just count the number of applications, there's a lot of double counting, or in some cases, triple or quadruple counting if people filed multiple applications. So really getting an idea of how many people have sought benefits and how many people have been paid, that's something that we're working on really hard. We have some of our data experts seeing how they can pull that together in a reliable way, because we want to know that and we want to be able to share that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Any other follow-up questions? If folks have more questions they'd like to ask.
Okay, it's Mike Rogaway again. David, a couple quick questions. People had had success at different points in the process, either talking to WorkSource offices or, working through the state legislature through their legislators. I understand the legislature has liaisons between them and your department working with constituents. I want to see if that's right. And has the process with the WorkSource offices changed? Are those no longer providing assistance?
So we do have liaisons, Mike, that are helping us work with legislators. Legislators have been very helpful. We know how difficult it is for people to get through to us. Legislators have been great about sharing information with people as we've given them updates, and they have been able to help a large number of their constituents directly. And certainly they have also been flagging for us the people that we want to focus on, the people that have been waiting the longest. So we have liaisons from other agencies that came over to help us out, and we've added some of our own new employees to help with that work as well. In terms of the WorkSource offices, you asked if we've changed the approach. And yes, we've changed the approach many times since the pandemic started, and we're doing that constantly. As we've seen what works well and what doesn't, and where the current pain points are, we're pretty much daily looking at how we can reallocate our folks, have them focus on the work that really needs to be the priority. So a couple of the things that we've done very recently, we announced Focus PUA because we know that that is a huge need, is to get through those PUA claims and to get people their benefits. We've added more WorkSource offices to actually being part of the unemployment insurance phone system. So people were calling them on their kind of separate phone system. We've actually added more offices in so that they're able to help the people that are calling in specifically about unemployment matters to the unemployment hotline. We've also taken a number of people, dozens of people from WorkSource offices have quickly learned how to work on different parts of the unemployment insurance system. And since we launched Focus PUA, we have scores and scores of them that are now processing PUA applications and the weekly claims.